Howdy, everybody. This is Zach. Oh, turbo kick. Do. On the podcast. Okay, we're gonna go down here now. Howdy, everybody. This is Zach from the Houston A&M Club and the Impactful Aggie podcast. Now, for this episode of the Impactful Aggie, I sat down with William Wade, class of 1973, and the founder of the Houston Aggie Volunteers. William does a ton of work with the Houston Food Bank through the Aggie Volunteers, so I thought he'd be a great guest to sit down with and talk about the state of hunger in America, as well as what it takes to keep the food bank running. So with that being said, please enjoy this episode of the Impactful Aggie. All right, howdy, Ags. This is Zach Hooper with the Impactful Aggie podcast. I'm sitting with William Wade, class of 70. That's right, 73. Excuse me. So, class 73, and he is the head of the Houston Aggie Volunteers, and not just the head, but he founded the organization almost 30 years ago.
1994, so yeah, we're going into year 27.
And I met William getting involved with the work that the Houston A&M Club does with the food bank, and I thought he'd be a great guest to speak with, not just about his experience at A&M and through his career, but also the work that he's doing with the food bank. So appreciate you being on, William.
I do. I'm glad to be here.
So when's the last time you went to campus?
Well, unfortunately, with I know football this fall is the first time in 51 years I didn't go to a game at Kyle Field. So it would have been way back in the summer once. It's hard to imagine that.
Does it even look close to the same place?
No, I mean, if you can imagine, back when I graduated in 1973, there was literally almost nothing. That would be what the west side of Wellburn Road, other than farms and barns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
13,000 students when I graduated.
13,000?
Total students.
What was, I know what's kind of funny about every, I guess you'd say, generation of Aggie is that as the campus evolves, so does the town of College Station, and every generation has their spots that they go to, bars, restaurants, dance halls, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to experience the Texas Hall of Fame right before it got torn down, and that was always a great spot. And of course you have Hurricane Harry's and all the usual spots. But what were the popular places when you were there?
I went through A&M without a car, so to be honest, I'm probably not the best person to tell you about that, but as strange as it may sound, on Sunday nights we go to cafeterias, which a lot of young people don't even go to now. There was a Wiener Schnitzel, I remember that, Whataburger, Taco Bell, and that was about it.
So you founded the Houston Aggie Volunteers in '94. Was there not anything going like that before you saw, and what, I mean, really?
The club really only had the mainstays of muster and the beginnings of coaches' nights, and that was really about it. I mean, there just wasn't anything else the club was doing than I thought we ought to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
how have you seen the group evolve in that amount of time?
Well, we've added so many events, and we tried to, and I sort of look at this as going to a cafeteria. Our obligation as a club ought to be to offer as many opportunities as possible for people to pick and choose what they like, what they don't like, but at least make them available. And we as with good volunteers have the ability certainly to organize these events, whether it's going to see the Christmas Carol at the Alley in December, whether it's going to a Texans game. So to me, people get notice every month. Here's the opportunities, and you pick and choose.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that you had some sort of clicking moment that made you realize you wanted to spend your time in this way. You know, what happened that ultimately influenced you to start the organization?
Part of it for me was personal. I mean, I spent some high school years on my grandparents' farm outside of Waco, and a lot of people have never been around farmers, people that make their living off the land. They're an incredibly great group of people, but they really face a lot of adversities. I mean, most of us don't worry about, oh, there's a hailstorm coming, or there's going to be a bad freeze. But obviously, when crops don't make, farmers, have a difficult time. So, you see that, you live that. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted on a farm, and so that's sort of been personal to me, and also just. I never did many divorce cases while I practiced law, but I did enough to see some people who, unfortunately, going through the divorce or afterwards, their standard of living goes way down for all kinds of reasons. And so some of them will have trouble putting food on the table. They would confide in me, and I knew about the food bank, and so I would send them to the food bank for help. So that's how all this sort of really got going. And then the same thing, we got solicited to help with Habitat for Humanity early on, and when we did that, and it sort of grew from there.
Are you seeing any other, well, I should say, have you had anything on your mind as far as any other organizations that you want to eventually get involved with?
I'd really like to see us get Habitat going again. Unfortunately, a lot of it is dependent upon the weather, like it's pouring down rain here today. But there's some other things we could do there, and there's other charities that we have helped in the past, because our idea of this was to provide manpower. We don't want people to come to us and use our people to raise money for their projects. What we're here to do is to provide manpower, whether it's manning registration desk at, say, the Jingle Bell Run, or some of the mixers at the Museum of Fine Arts, or a lot of different things like that. And we've got a pretty good track record of having people turn out for things that interest them.
Mm-hmm. Recently, you were awarded the Presidential Recognition of Service from the A&M Club, and in your speech, you gave us a piece of wisdom. You said 4 things: always do the right thing, never be afraid to do the right thing, leave the world better than you found it, and be someone's hero. You spent your professional life practicing law. So as a once practicing lawyer, I can imagine that your experiences in your career probably helped you shape those pieces of advice. Am I accurate?
Yeah, it's being a trial attorney is incredibly stressful. You devote incredible amounts of time to a case. You have a case on contingency, it may or may not pay off in the end. But there's just a lot of stress, and there's lots of things that are unpredictable, things that happen in a trial that you never think are going to happen. And the thing I try to tell young lawyers, because I tried well over 100 jury trials while I was practicing, and whether it's a criminal case, I didn't do a whole lot of criminal work, but I did some, mainly civil. But anytime that, most courtrooms, that jury comes back, they have a knocker on the door, which tells the judge, we've got a verdict. And all I can tell you is, every time you hear that knock, you jump, because you don't know, did I win? Did I lose? it's very, very stressful, and I try to encourage young lawyers, think twice before you go into it, because there is a tremendous amount of stress involved.
Who would you say, in light of that last pillar, or be someone's hero? Who were your heroes growing up? Who did you look up to?
I tell you what, obviously your parents, the things they did to get us to where myself and my two brothers needed to be. My mom's mother, my one grandmother, whose farm we lived on in high school, great respect for things she went through in her life. A number of high school teachers, high school football coach who took a bunch of guys who didn't win a game when we were sophomores, and a new coach comes in, and all of a sudden we win district my junior and senior years. And that taught me that one person can make a difference. Because that was the only thing that really changed with our football team, was that one person. But yeah, high school teachers, some great professors at A&M, at the LBJ school, and at the UT Law School. I mean, I'm a big fan of teachers.
COVID has undoubtedly had an impact on the demand for food. You told me that the demand was up 60%, and for our listeners, we are actually at the food bank. You can probably hear the forklifts and things going on in the background, but many people have lost their jobs. They're taking every opportunity to get that extra help, as I've seen personally at the distribution days. What has the food bank been doing to try to meet that increasing demand?
Well, they've got a great CEO here in Brian Green. They got a good operations guy in Jim Day. I'm not sure how they do their jobs, because they're pulled constantly. And with the incredible increase in demand, they have to try to match that with supply, and that's very difficult to do. But as we discussed earlier, I encourage people to come out here to see how massive this operation is. But all those loading docks down there, every 30 minutes on an average day, there's an 18-wheeler either pulls in or leaves. And just think of the logistics of that. And you're operating a lot of that with volunteers.
Yeah, and to your point, the scope, it's not something that you can really understand until you see it for yourself. When you and I first met, you took me through the warehouse, and I could not believe the size of it, and not just the size, but how much of that was refrigeration. And the first thing I thought of is what the overhead alone must be on something like this. Where does the money come from?
Well, so obviously the food bank relies not just on people coming out and volunteering, but people donating food, but they really, they always require monetary donations to pay for that kind of stuff, to pay for like I say, the forklifts, to pay the salaries of the guys that drive the forklifts, guys and women who drive the forklifts. So it's basically a big business, even though it's technically a non-profit, but it still has a bottom line it has to meet. They have to keep the lights turned on and everything else. So it's the largest food bank in America, which I try to tell people. And that sadly sort of tells you the scope of the problem here in Houston.
Right.
Because it goes out 18 counties around, actually going up almost all the way to A&M.
Mm-hmm. So when most people, I think, when they donate a food item, they don't necessarily think about it past to that point. Can you kind of take us through that process of how that canned good or whatever they're donating gets into a box and into the hands of those who need it?
So there's good and bad with donations, and obviously the food bank takes all the donations of quality food that they can get. But if you take a donated item, for instance, it initially has to come into the warehouse. So somebody on the staff, one of the paid workers with a forklift or something has to get it into the warehouse off the semis or off the items that are donated at the front desk. It goes through what's called first sort. Well, that's somebody has to check it to see, is it damaged? Is it past expiration? From there it goes to second sort. There it has to be specifically sorted into different, I think there's 20-something types of pallets, everything from vegetables, fruits, you name it. So that takes a third group of people to take the stuff from second sort, get it on the right pallet, and then it's got to get put in the warehouse and then out to the 200 plus distribution points, primarily small church pantries and other nonprofits in Houston. So one item can easily go through the hands of 5 or 6 people. Well, it's great for the volunteers, but some of that is paid staff. So all things being equal, I think, I've never asked Brian this, but yes, they're going to take donated food items, but in a time like this, what they can really use is the cash, because not only is the cash used to operate the food bank, but they can obtain product at below wholesale cost from large vendors. They can arrange cheap purchases from the grocery stores. So it's a combination of actual food items and monetary donations that they need a good mix of that.
The Farmers to Families food program was a federal initiative this year to try and help meet the increased demand for food during COVID, but from what I've researched, is coming to a halt earlier than expected because the demand was so great. And I think a lot of people in their minds, they think, if nothing else, the government can step in, they can help out. But it's really ultimately up to us, isn't it?
Correct. Because, if you got just, like when we do food drives, if you get, say, 200 people at an event, and everybody brings, say, just 9 or 10 canned goods, then you've got an enormous number right there. And you got enough food drives going on, then it really helps provide the end product that they need to get out to the families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of us can. I know growing up, there were occasional food drives at our school. You bring a can of green beans or corn or something. I think a lot of people, when they decide they're going to pick up an item, that's kind of the go-to. But the scope of items that are needed is actually pretty wide, isn't it?
I mean, sure. For instance, people don't think of paper products. Well, people preparing their own food, they need napkins, paper towels, they need toilet paper. Food bank accepts donations of dog and cat food. Because for some people, that's their only interaction. Some of the elderly people with something that's alive every day is a pet. But absolutely, stuff has to be non-perishable. But the food bank, has monetary donations will allow them to go out and purchase some of the items that need refrigeration, because there's a huge need for produce to maintain people's health, fruits, vegetables, things of that sort. And milk, dairy, you saw in our G, the huge pallets of milk and cheese. They can never have too much, is all I'm saying.
So this has been a weird year, and at the time of this filming, or this recording, it's the 31st. We're on the very last day of it, and God willing, it's going to get better. But even after all we've learned so far about the virus and how to protect ourselves, a lot of people are still very skittish when it comes to getting out and being around people. And that's a very big part of the distribution day, the food packing nights that the A&M Club does specifically on the first Tuesdays, but What are some things that people can do aside from being there in person? You talked about the monetary, the side of it that they certainly need as much help on. But is there anything that they can do when it comes? Maybe it's build awareness or
sure. Not only that, there's all type of, even some of the civic clubs now that are slowly getting back into having in-person meetings. I mean, they're looking for speakers. I mean, the food bank can provide those type of speakers to tell them about what's going on, how they can participate. And you touched on a great point. I've got a lot of friends. I've been blessed to be in Houston for quite a few years now. So I know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Aggies. Having been president of the club, having helped run this for 26, 27 years. But the one question I get and have gotten since March is, well, I don't think it's safe to go out there. And all I can say to that is nothing could be further from the truth. You walk in here, your temperature's taken. They have strict rules that follow those of the CDC in Atlanta. There's hand washing before, during, and after each shift in the warehouse. Masks are required. The gloves are required. In my mind, it's much safer than any grocery store or any other retail establishment in Houston. And I'm 68 years old, so I'm theoretically, at a point where I ought to be more concerned than somebody your age. But I look at this as following the rules, wearing the mask, doing the social distancing. You're going to end up just fine. Much more so than, just going to a bar when you really don't need to go to a bar, things like that.
What are one or two things that you wish people knew about the food bank that's typically not marketed?
Well,
not advertised.
Yeah, I think the fact that they do not realize how many of their friends, neighbors, or other family members may be using the resources from the food bank. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were at NRG enough to see some people that some folks might say, well, okay, that person looks like they may need help, but I was flooded back in Harvey and I was living in Bel Air. Well, that's a really nice subdivision of Houston, part of Houston. There are people in Bel Air benefiting from the food bank. Because it's not just $1 million houses. There's a lot of smaller, older houses. And a lot of those houses have widows who've outlived their husbands. These ladies are in their 80s and 90s. And a lot of them, they don't get proper outreach. And that's something everybody can do to look out for your neighbors.
Are there any kind of delivery systems in place for people who can't come out to those distribution days?
The food bank, like I say, the primary effort is to try to get the food out to all of these nonprofits. I think part of the thinking being the smaller churches and whatnot know pretty much who their membership is, who need help, who just had a big crisis in their family because of a medical bill or something of that nature. So yeah, the whole goal here is to make sure that anybody that needs the help gets it. And you're right, it's a huge issue of how logistically do you do this and do it as efficiently as you can. But it's got to be done every day. It's because kids got to eat every day. And I know we've seen this with some of the kids we work with in our Aggie Camp program, and it breaks my heart, to serve pizza to some of these kids who are on the free lunch program, and we take them out one Saturday a month, and the one we had with the young kid that it was a Saturday, and we had pizza left over, and all of a sudden he's got grease all in the front of his pants because he stuffed I don't know how many pieces of pizza in his pants. to me, you know, he's going to take it home because he's got brothers and sisters who need something to eat. And so you see that and you know that need is there. I mean, most people take 3 meals a day for granted.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just not the case for a lot of folks out there.
Yeah. What final piece of advice would you give to someone, maybe just graduating A&M, they're going into the quote-unquote real world, and especially in a time like this?
Well, I tell you, they've got to maintain a good network of friends. I mean, I know the temptation's there just to lock the door, keep out the germs, whatever it might be. But if you don't have a great group of friends to help sustain you through the good and the bad times, you're really amiss. You know, and I know it's easy because I've been there. I got divorced twice. It's easy to get so wrapped up in your work, or you're working 70, 80 hours a week. But in the end, you know, I think I've told you this before, the best advice I ever got in my life was from a mentor who told me, and his words basically were, let me know if you ever go to a funeral and the hearse has a luggage rack. And he told me that at a time where I was mad. I'd come out of a divorce and I'd lost a bunch of stuff, as happens in divorces. And he got tired of me whining about that. And so when George Grader told me that, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because it's true. There's not a person on this earth who's been to a funeral where the hearse has a luggage rack. So whatever you're doing, leave your good efforts here. Whether it's helping others, if you're in an opposition to do that, donate money, donate food, but everybody can do that. I've told you before, it's not unusual to see people out here at the food bank in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
So when friends tell me, well, I don't know if I can do that kind of work, that's a bunch of baloney. We can all help, and we truly are. Some people don't believe this, but we all truly are a global village, you know. And people deserve their human decency. They deserve, in my mind, the right not to go hungry. And this all ties in with what A&M wants us to do, which is, you know, one of those 6 core values, selfless service. And I can't emphasize that enough. You know, leave your mark. That somebody, you know, in the future, you know, after I'm, you know, dead and gone, will say, man, that guy really inspired me. And just like the people who've inspired me, and we pass it on and hopefully make the world a better place.
William, I appreciate you being on, man. Thanks for your work, and thanks for sitting down with me today.
Anytime.
All right, gig 'em.
Thanks.